Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann, and today I want to talk a little bit about Rebecca Weatherspoon's Beards and Bondage trilogy. We've got 3 books here. We've got Haven, Sanctuary, and Harbor, all with beautiful covers. So these 3 books are really interesting. They were a really fun read, and the name of the series sort of gives away a little bit what they're about. All of the men are very handsome and very bearded. And then there are BDSM elements to all of the romantic relationships that are the centerpieces of each of these books. And as someone who doesn't know much about that scene, I thought that it was handled really, really well. I mean, it was really sexy. It wasn't sort of like as extreme and undesirable as I would have expected it to be just based on my personal history. I mean, it was just really excellently done. And one piece about that is the communication between the characters whenever there are intimate scenes happening. And that's something that I've noticed in all of Rebecca Weatherspoon's books that I've read, is that they're just good models for like good sexual communication and safe sex practices. And so I really appreciate that, reading that in a book. And just a great example of how to do that well and have it just be part of the romance and part of the sexual tension. Just really, really well done. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the book. And then all of these books, I think, are classed as suspenseful romance or romantic suspense or like something like that. And the suspense part doesn't last very long in any of these books, and I would say that it really only applies to the first 2 books. So in the first 2 books, we have our heroines, Claudia in the first book and Liz in the second book. Both experience like a near-death, traumatic, violent event in the very beginning of the book. It just like opens with a bang, and that's not a spoiler. I mean, it's the thing you know about these books is that we've got these 2 heroines who have been traumatized and have a lot to deal with in terms of sort of grief and getting their own sense of safety back. And part of that process is that they end up sort of taking a step back from their regular everyday lives and really coming to grips with what happened to them in various ways, seeking a place of safety. And for various reasons, sort of like who's available and who they know, they end up sort of doing that with these 2 guys, Shep in the first book and Silas in the second book. And one thing I really liked about these books is that there is sort of an instant love bit, like there's an instant connection between the characters, but then everybody steps back because everybody's very cognizant of the fact that this has been a traumatic situation for the heroines, and you don't want to jump into a very intense romantic emotional relationship after you've been through that. And so I really, really like that aspect of the book. So we get that boom, we get that instant connection. That's really compelling in romance writing. But then, yeah, everybody takes a step back. The heroines take space to go off and do their own thing. They go to therapy. Like, it's wonderful. And they sort of create space and get to the place where they can actually enter into a relationship with someone else. So I really like that aspect of the books. And that also holds in the third book. And in the third book, prior to the start of the book, something traumatic happens to the main characters, the death of a loved one. So these are trigger warnings here about trauma. And the death of a loved one in these books. But so the heroine is going through a somewhat similar process to the heroines in the first 2 books, with that process of grief and sort of rebuilding your sense of self after an event like that. And similar thing where she is able to take the space that she needs after sort of an instant love connection with the love interest to go do that a bit before she comes back and is ready for that emotional connection. So again, just really love that aspect of these 3 books. So all of that said, those were some things that I loved. The first 2 books, the writing was good, but it was definitely sort of middle of the road. It was very compelling. It definitely did draw me in, but there were a little bit of rough spots. There were a little bit more sort of romance tropes that came up in these, like a little bit more of the miscommunications between the characters would happen, and the characters were just a little bit less well defined. And none of that was bad. Like, these are great sort of solid books, not 5-star reads, but really enjoyable. But then I felt like those sort of problems, to the extent that they're problems, were really overcome in Harbor. This was just a much smoother piece of writing. And in particular, the characters in this one just blew me away. They are much more clearly defined as like real people that have a lot more, they just feel more fleshed out, even though we get the same like amount of detail about who they are. But just the way in which that detail is conveyed and the way in which the dialogue happens and everything just like felt much more realistic in this book. And I think this book is, I think in the description it does say like this can be a standalone novel. You don't have to have, and that's true for all of these, they can all be standalone. You don't have to have read the previous books in the trilogy, but the previous books do just flesh out a little bit some of the side characters, because you've already seen the love stories of like 2 of the heroine's best friends in this book. And so they don't have much presence in this book, but you do hear about them. And so that's kind of fun to see that continuity. But you could just read this book as a standalone, and I definitely wouldn't blame you. The other fun thing about this book is that the primary relationships in the first 2 books are cisgender heterosexual relationships. And in this book, we get a polyamorous triad with 2 men and 1 woman. And so we sort of start out with the heroine Brooke, but then we get the POVs of these 2 guys. And I just thought it was handled beautifully. Like the relationship between these 3 people and how they would communicate and the dynamics of that. It was beautiful. And I almost wish this book had been longer, or that we would get another installment in the series that would do some of the follow-up of how that relationship continued to develop. Although she did give it a pretty nice ending, but no ending is final. So it'd be great to get a follow-up. But yeah, I feel like she nailed it so much that I could have read more, just like exploring and that relationship and seeing it develop. So I think I've said enough about these books. I really enjoyed them. And if you are at all interested in them, I hope you go check them out. I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.